In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but from evil one. Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and glory, forever and ever. Okay. Oh, whoa. I need to mute whatever is. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Awkward. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be. And their leg. Okay, we're good now. Okay, who's gonna be the mic person today? Is somebody willing to walk around? Thank you. Thank you, Michael. You're a hero. Okay. I'm sorry again to those of you online, just for the format of the first two or three ish are going to be very questiony, and maybe annoyingly so. But again, like the point is to kind of force out the thinking. There will be actual content, I promise. But last week, and all anything that is done here is going to be online on the website. You can access it. Last week, the point we wanted to get to was arriving at the concept of absolute truth. Because the projection that I want, or the direction that I'm heading in, is I kind of want to undo narratives that we've socially plugged into, knowingly or unknowingly, to kind of undo those and to get some first principles back in, because of the things that I think we just assume, or presume when we're having conversations, either with others or within our own communities about faith and what it is that we're saying. So last time was truth of this. To use the analogy that somebody had used, was that the known analogy of the elephant, right? Is that people, relativity, or different beliefs and all that, the my truth, your truth business that I'm not really into. It was referring to, okay, there's an elephant and we're looking at different parts of the elephant. We're touching different parts of the elephant, etc. But last week was to not discuss what's my perspective on what I'm viewing as the elephant. It was more to get to the point of that there is an elephant. Because if there isn't one, then we're all psycho. And we're all pretty much going nowhere. What I'm probably not going to talk about in this series of Back to Basics, not that it's not important, I'm just not that into it, is apologetics, where we're discussing which part of the elephant, how do I know it's my elephant, et cetera, et cetera. Like I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. If you're interested, there's cool resources, but I'm not one of them. So today I want to look a little bit at the implications of truth. And we're going to talk about freedom. And then next week, I think, is going to be the nature of faith. And then there might be one about goodness, about what's good. There might be, and then the narrative. But the goal for me is the narrative, because once we can get into the narrative, then we can have real conversations. Because if the narrative's not there, you can't talk about anything in life. You can't talk about career, actually. You can't talk about work. You can't talk about marriage. You can't talk about Eucharist. You can't talk about anything unless it's plugged into the narrative. But it's funny because I'm just rambling for a bit and then I'm going to get to the questions. It's funny because the absolute truth thing often annoys people. I'm not sure why. And yet, almost everybody in trying to answer any of the questions, whether last week or any time or this coming one, or even atheists, we're always making comments like, that just doesn't make sense, right? That's just not logical. But in saying something, what's up? And saying something is not logical or needs to make sense, I think what people are forgetting is that even saying something like that, you're appealing to absolute truth, because nothing can make sense if there's nothing to be made sense of, right? So in saying I want it to be rational, you're already referring to the elephant, right? You're already saying, since that exists somewhere, we don't want to talk about it, this thing needs to make sense to me. right? So the use of sense is already an appeal to absolute truth, because you can't ask for something to be sensical if there's no such thing as sense. See what I mean? Like philosophical, but round and round in circles. So um I'm debating. I take some time to warm into this because I haven't done this question thing for a while. The framing question for today, I was gonna, usually when I do this, I start with the are we free question, which is what I want to think about, and then hash out certain things. I'm gonna try something different than what I normally do, and if it sucks, the next people won't get it that way. All right, I'm gonna play a video. Um, as I said earlier, the video is not something I am endorsing at all. I'm making a point with the video for anyone who takes one sentence out of context and says, AP showed this video and he thinks this is funny and I don't. All right, how do I? Oh, you've got it. Okay. For those of you online, I'm gonna put the link in the chats. Please just mute yours so that we're not all hearing it play multiple times. I might fast forward through part of it. I don't think we need to watch the whole thing. I actually think it's painful. But I had never heard of her. Okay. Andrew, can you hit play? How do we get the sound? There you go. I don't know if this is normal culture, but can you put the subtitles on? Yep. Please note the one Asian in the room for the chorus when we get there. Your facial expression is perfect. Fast forward to the end. It's just bad. She develops her accent even better. We can stop. Okay, so how many of you think that's okay? Okay, so raise your hand if you think that's not okay. Why? Why is that not okay? Why is it not okay to do a Chinese accent or an Asian accent and appropriate Chinese culture of ninja?
It's demeaning
Why?
because you're making fun of their accent when they're learning English and thereby making fun of their culture.
Just because you weren't here last week, I'm playing devil's advocate a lot, so I'm gonna be a jerk. So what's the problem with that?
With like demeaning other people or making fun of their accents.
Yeah.
It puts them down. It makes them feel like they're not like part of whatever system they've gone to. If it's like England or if it's like America. You're
So
kind of
what?
saying we get um, I mean, if you want like a functioning society, you want to accept people from all backgrounds and all cultures.
Why does that make society function, and why do I want a functional society? Sorry, I'm gonna do that again. So I'm just like, for those who were here last week, it's on purpose. I just want to undo everything. because these rhetorical things are the narratives we're in, and it doesn't mean that everything in our narrative is wrong, right? But I want to poke at all of it.
Is it better to say it's haram? Like you're being bogus.
Who made haram haram?
God,
Why believe in God?
because of the world that we see around us, its miraculous nature, things like pi or like E or things that go on for infinity, or like the fact that the Earth being 3 centimeters closer or further from the sun will make us burn or freeze, like all of these little perfections.
Okay, so the apologetic stuff that I'm not gonna jump into, but so you presumed it because of God.
Yep.
Okay, let's pretend there's no God, which is the narrative of the almost majority today. Why should I care? Because I would argue that even secularists, atheist secularists would still find this inappropriate. Why?
I mean, atheist secularists don't really have like a why for being alive. They think that they're just going to turn into dirt and then it's all over. They don't have like anything to give them like a moral, I guess, guide.
Right. So all the reason to not care. Um, but they might say, okay, anyone else, why can't I make fun of an accent? I mean, if I did a British accent, it actually is apparently okay, but not Chinese or Indian. Why would it be, why is it wrong to do it? Why is it not okay? Majority of you said not okay. No one knows why it's not okay.
No, because even in secular society, we have obvious to one another part of a social contract. Yeah.
Sorry, can you eat the mic for the online people? My bad.
Uh,
Sorry.
There's a social contract. We live amongst one another. We have a moral obligation because God tells us to love one another, right? But even without God, we still have a social contract that we want to operate together in the fabric of society, and it benefits everybody.
Okay. You're online people, let me know if you guys can hear or not hear in general. Whenever it gets quiet, just let us know. And I'm noting some of the chat things. I'm going to bring them back in a second.
So going back to just needing a functional society um, outside of God, we need a functional society in order to rise in the hierarchy of needs and desires. If we don't have a functional society, then we resort to our more basic animalistic instincts, which is let me kill this person to get what I want. And you're constantly in defense and you don't get to kind of elevate on your desires and struggles.
Who came up with the hierarchy of needs? Maslow. Who cares what Maslow says?
Because it's just been proven and kind of based off of observation that if you don't have you know heat, you don't have water, then worrying about your education is less of a concern.
Okay, I'm going to connect it to another question, but we might come back to it. Just because it's somewhat connected. Why should I even care about that? Why do I care if others live? Why can't I, for example, walk into another country and take it over and murder whoever I don't like? I'm intentionally not bringing up Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. I mean, in general, unfortunately, every kind of example I have, something is happening in the world in it right now. So I promise I'm not trying to stoke any particular political view or stripe. Actually, before you answer that question, online we have someone who said it's what society has deemed not okay, at least for now. So you're saying that society decides what's okay and what's not okay. And I'm going to come back to that for sure. Another person is saying because she was using it as a point to mock Asians, which is offensive. And I would respond while playing devil's advocate is, who cares if it's offensive? Why should I care? If I want to say something, why can't I just say it? And so another person saying that the reason why one would care or not depends on their beliefs. And I'd say, cool, but then what happens when we all have different beliefs? Then what do we do then? But let's link it to the hostile takeover. Can we just move into a country and take it over? Promise. Eat the mic.
So like I think like it comes down for me at least, like I feel like humans are born without like if you take away God, like but I mean God says all children are born like pure, right? And we're all born with like that sense of right and wrong. I feel like it's instilled in us. I've not seen an evil child yet, at least. Like that's purely evil and wants to kill someone. So I think if the environment surrounding us nurtures us to continue in that way, then that sense of right and wrong develops on its own, whether we're guided by morals from God or society. It's just basically on our like environment, which for us then gives us the sense of hostile takeover is wrong. But for someone who's lived playing devil's advocate, for someone who's lived in a society where it's just been everyone taking over everyone's stuff, that's the only thing that they would know. So to them, that would be correct. So I'm kind of in a
Yeah, as like I don't know how it's wrong yet. So if you saw an evil kid, it would be okay?
no.
Okay. Because there's evil kids. I mean, whatever evil is.
Yeah. Lord of the Flies, evil kids.
Yeah. So then why not take them over? How many of you think it'd be okay if you see a bunch of evil kids to walk in and murder them? Raise your hand if you think that's okay.
How do you know they're evil?
Good question. Let's say you just don't like how they look. Why can't you go in and take it?
Trying to force your belief on other people usually just pushes them away from that belief,
Who cares if they're pushed away? I got what I wanted.
which is murder.
Yeah. Why can't I want murder? It might be.
Really taking it back to the social contract point and the other points that we discussed earlier. Isn't it we're created as social beings, and isn't it, I guess, the most primal instinct is to have community, because that's how we survived in the past. Whenever we were still building settlements, it was, you didn't want to anger the person next to you because that's one less person defending you, or that is one less body in between you and getting stabbed in the back. So I would argue that the need for connection, that social contract, is our most primal form, kind of outside of a spiritual realm. I would assume that is the drive that kept us alive for so long.
So does that make it right? Because I'd argue that those earliest forms of community, tribes didn't treat each other very nicely. My bad.
How fantastic.
I went back to Christine. I thought you had your hand up. Murder is bad.
Who decided it's bad?
So if we're gonna talk about social contracts, and I know this is politically extremely incorrect to talk about these days, but it's just, they're good examples. America was very fine with the social contract that included slavery. Right? It was built into the fabric of the country. And I'm sorry, it was not just the South, it was everybody, that had different forms of it. Okay. There seemed to be an accepted social contract in Germany of the Third Reich. Right? Doesn't seem like a lot of people actually did much to stop that. They were fine with it. So does that make it okay if the social contract allows for it, Matthew?
Prior to World War II, there was this belief of positivism. If it was the law, then it's okay. And then World War II and the Third Reich kind of destroyed it, because all of a sudden something really, really, really bad. Not that slavery was already existing, but like really bad for white people. Then that broke the idea of positivism, right? So like, obviously the social contract goes beyond law. And I think it goes back to what Thomas said, that it is social contract is not based on any one country. There is something that is driving our moral understanding. And so religion's been around forever. And so like from an anthropological point perspective, the idea of morality to a higher being has been around. Obviously in different cultures, there were different things, whether like, Incans, they were whatever, right? Like, but there was a right and wrong. And so that's been layered into the social contract that a higher being is imparting some morality that is not just amongst each other, but there is a right and wrong to a higher power as well.
Okay. If I forget to come back to that, remind me to come back to that because it's where a lot of this is going to be heading. Let me ask another question and flog a dead horse. Forget taking over a country. Why can't I walk into my neighbor's house uninvited and take stuff from their fridge?
They'll take this stuff back.
So
And
what?
some of your stuff too.
Okay. So what's wrong with that?
You end in a worse position than you started by trying to get in a better position than you wanted in the beginning, than you were in the beginning.
If you don't have stuff like your homeless.
Then you have nothing to lose. You might as well do it, yeah.
Okay. Consistent. Anyone else? Why can't I just walk into someone's house and take stuff?
Oh, God, still right.
As a starting point, yeah, if we remove the narrative of a religion,
This concept.
consequences. Can you? Oh no, Mark, my bad. Welcome back. Sorry, my bad. Eat the mic.
Oh, okay. So the way I see it is that you're wearing clothes right now, right? Did you make them? No, someone else did. There's food in your fridge. Were you farming those animals on those vegetables and fruits? No, someone else did. Right? Yeah, and you can't function without society. So you have to respect other people's boundaries for them to respect yours. And you have to contribute the way they contribute. We can't move forward without each other.
Oh, you're going exactly where I wanted. Okay, so who created boundaries?
I think it's designed that way by ourselves because we saw that that was the most optimal path that leads to growth.
Excellent. What if I no longer think it's the best path for growth? Whatever growth means.
Inevitably, you may become cynical and say, I don't need anyone else. I don't need anything else. And then you may turn on your neighbor. And then you realize that that disconnect in relationship causes a catastrophe. And then you start up again together. And then you fall and then you start up again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but so what?
It's cyclical.
So what? What if I break the cycle and just take what I want?
Well, then society will collapse
Why?
because you don't have someone making your clothes or putting that food in your fridge.
I'll take the clothes from the store.
And then inevitably, Yani, it's as if you continue to do that and other people continue to do that, then we collapse as society. That growth that we've established diminishes, or it gets dropped down, go down a different tier.
Okay. So you're saying we can't because it'll cause problems and it'll undo society because society made up things, and that because it made up things, we need it to function. But if I undo it, I undo society. Someone online wrote legal repercussions. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Please.
Thank
Eat the mic.
I think to Mark's point, it
Uh-huh.
starts like a chain reaction. Yeah, I think it starts like a chain reaction that like throws off like the equilibrium. Like if you think about like an ecosystem and you kill off the bees and the bees stop pollinating the plants and the plants die and stop feeding, like if you throw off the equilibrium of like an ecosystem, it can, like, to Mark's point, like once you do something that sets precedent, like if I deem it okay to behave in this way, and that sets precedent for society, then society collapses.
So who is the first person who decided this is my property? If we just go straight to the beginning of it, who is the first person that gets to say, hey, actually, this piece of land or house or property or chicken is mine. Sorry, was it? Okay, let's say it's Adam and Eve, or let's say it was two monkeys who became man, whatever narrative you want. And again, because I'm online is going to crucify me, I'm just saying it. Ever the narrative is whoever was the first there, who decided that this is how we're splitting it, and were they right?
This is experience to take ownership of things when you put work into it. You start to form some sort of attachment to it.
Okay, I'm so attached to your sweater.
I would argue that I'm more attached to it because I'm wearing it. Because I've put more work into it. I brought it here and such.
So work decides attachment. Why can't it be my affection for the color? Yeah, this is where you offer me the sweater. Online, someone's saying a code or a system established by someone who put her vote into power. I'm going to come back to all the legal stuff in a second. Okay, let me ask another question on the same kind of thinking, but on a different plane. And I wrote this question forgetting that this is a problem in America. I was not thinking of America when I wrote this question. So I was going to say, why can't I just walk in the US and just live there? Let's make it Canada. Why can't an American just walk into Canada and say, I now live here? Why can't they do that? It's too cold. BC's all right.
Before like borders and border patrol and all those things, technically you could, before they like started keeping track of who lives where and like the census and all that, technically you could just like pick up all your stuff and just go
So when and why did those start?
to track all of us.
Why?
Because the government wants to somehow benefit from knowing where we are and who we are and all that stuff.
Who formed government?
People
Why did they form government?
to make money.
Or anyone? Okay, safety. Oh, I love where this is going. I'm excited.
No, they don't make us safer. Not now, but they use it. Not in general. To increase militarism.
Increase utilitarian.
To appreciate, oh, that's the maybe talk number 4. We're gonna have a lot of fun with that one. Okay, so you're saying I would agree that might have been part of the cause, but who decides what's useful? The majority. Excellent. Okay. So not that the elephant, it's what the majority looking at the elephant have decided as what's the right thing. Matthew.
The majority is a more modern concept, but before that, countries existed because people with power, claimed power, and then they drew borders, and then they fought over those borders, and so before it was the majority, it was who had majority of the power.
Okay. Something brought up safety. Why can't I drive without my seatbelt? My body, my choice.
In all these scenarios, you can drive without your seatbelt, you can go and invade somebody, you can do whatever you want, you can walk around naked, but you're gonna face the consequences of whatever you do. So there are things put in place to keep us a society, a civil society, not animals like everybody had mentioned, but you're gonna face the consequences.
I loved everything until you said civil. What makes it civil?
That one.
Because civil is referring to something. Promise. Okay.
Just to play devil's advocate, why do we need to separate ourselves from animalistic behavior?
I'm asking those very questions. We did this last time, and I'm like, amen. Why? Why not? Again, I'm not trying to be annoying with the sake of being annoying as much as I'm hoping you're seeing the narratives that we're plugging into And that whatever these statements that we make so casually are referring to something, right? That we're not often thinking about or discussing. Somebody was gonna say something.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's because of our weakness. I mean, I'm not gonna do this to somebody because I don't want it done to me, but if I'm the strongest, I'll do whatever I want. And if there's no God, then who cares? I mean, I'm looking out for me, I don't care about anybody else. But I
Amen.
think at the end of the day, it's about who's the strongest. Whoever's the strongest can do it. I mean, and then you make laws so that like you can eat like even the prey. But I mean, essentially, the strongest person does not need that. The weakest person does. Stronger, I mean, if you're strongest, then who cares?
Evolutionary theory. Yeah. So you're saying that there's not a objective why, there's a subjective why in terms of strength.
Depends on what your objective actually is. I mean, if there's no higher being and there's nothing else to look for but yourself, then do whatever you want. I mean, as long as you can actually back it up and it's not gonna come back to bite you, you're gonna do it.
Who cares if it bites you?
No, but yeah.
Okay.
That was,
So then utilitarianism.
I mean,
okay.
at the end of the day, there's nothing else.
Okay. I'll maybe ask one more. I've been using different categories of questions on purpose to make a very broad point that I'll get to in a second. We already asked it earlier, so I kind of want to change the question. I was going to say, why can't I just kill my neighbor? Why can't I, if my neighbor's house is obstructing my view of the beautiful sunset, why can't I bulldoze it? I really want you to explain the civil, but
I mean, it's the same answer, like, why can't you kill the person? Why can't you steal his sweater? I would steal his sweater, but it's technically technically you can't do all of these things. There's no, you can drive without a seatbelt. You can like she said, walk around naked. Please don't do that.
No, I wouldn't.
You can, but it's like, should you, like, for your own benefit, should you do some of these things? Like, if you bulldoze your neighbor's house and you live in a society and that society has rules and you break those rules and those rules have repercussions of them being broken, you're going to be like eating the backlash. But you're fully capable of like whatever it is, that's free will. But it doesn't mean that you should.
Okay, let me do two rabbit holes from that. We won't go too far down, but what was your first sentence? There's a key word that I was going to use from that.
Technically, you can't do any all of that.
Mhm.
Should you?
Okay, so you brought in a should, but that wasn't the word that's trying to remember. So I might only have one rabbit hole because I can't remember the other one already. But let me take the bigger rabbit hole, which relates to what you said. Kind of. Where do laws come from? Yeah. And because some people online are saying the law and the structure of society, the people, is someone answering that question now. Where do the rules come from? Go for it.
I'm not gonna answer that.
Okay.
I'll take it one question at a time. Back to the civil thing.
Okay.
I think now thinking about it, maybe from the point where you mentioned who was the first person who said, this is my land, this is what I own, this is me. I mean, I'm speaking from God's perspective. It wasn't really ours. Like, he gave it to us. We were here, and then he said, this is yours. And then when we decided to do what we wanted to do, we faced the consequence of not being in his presence or around him or all of that, and then do our own thing. And when we did that, we became uncivil. We started killing. We experienced greed, and I want your jacket because I don't care what you did for it. I don't care how much you paid. I don't care who made it. Now it's mine. And it's like they said, whoever's strongest gets to do that. So civil is our nature. This is who we are. If we needed to be animals, we would have been created animals. But animals exist, and the way we see it and the way we, like, if we were to live in a jungle, sure. We would act like animals, they even have their own rules. Like, it's the strongest who wins, it's, what's it called? Survival of the fittest, that's
Mhm.
what it is. Whoever is the fittest gets it done. But they even have the rules where if a lion has eaten their prey, I think they can go like a week without eating something else, without being greedy about it. Now we become worse than animals. Like, we go and reach for something that's not ours, even though we have it already, just because we can.
Okay, so what you've just done is referred to a narrative. Okay, which is where this all going. Yes, no, that's exactly, well done. She was like bracing for it. I'm like, excellent, because we will talk about all of that, right? But is you're referring to a narrative. So in placing yourself in a narrative, you're viewing the world in a specific way. I remember my other rabbit hole before I asked where laws came from, and it's a very short one, which will make much more clear where I'm going with this. Can I fly?
Try.
Okay.
Define fine. Your ultimate.
Can I, with my physiology, on my own merit, can I fly? Can I grow gills? Why not? Okay, it's not my design. Okay, other rabbit hole, and we're gonna start putting it together. Where do laws come from? The majority? Like, what caused people to say we're gonna put rules?
I think, and like, we mirrored nature, which is, I'm bringing God into this, but like, nature is designed by God, that's what we believe, right? Everything is designed by God. And we mirrored what we saw in nature, and then we tried to make it better. Because we think we can do stuff better usually, but a lot of the time it doesn't work, which we have history as our track record. And it does not.
Okay, so communist, by the way, people online, I am reading what you're writing. Okay, communist Russia had rules.
Did they work?
Doesn't matter. Where do rules come from? Why do they have rules?
The people in charge?
It typically comes out from trial and error, but I think it comes out to scale.
Okay.
For example, I had a roommate once, and we sat up and we were talking for hours, and it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. The next day, he came to me. He's like, "Next time, let's cut it short. Let's go to bed at around 10 o'clock. You know, let's cut." It's not that he didn't enjoy it. It's just that he realized his day was more tiresome because he stayed 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning talking to me. So he made a self rule for himself. Hello, so I'm going to cut it short. 10:30, 11 o'clock. I believe that society creates these laws to better themselves on a day-to-day basis. But I think there's individual laws. I want to go to bed at 10:30 p.m. And then there's like groups of laws. Socialism, does this work for us? Communism, does this work for us? But the problem is that my friend saw the difference in one day. He said, "Now today was a tough day because I stayed up late yesterday." So societies come up with other rules for themselves, but sometimes it takes decades or even centuries to see the collapse of those rules. So I believe that laws come from trial and error, both individually and to scale.
So why should I follow them if I don't like it? What if I don't care if I'm tired at work, but you're making me stop talking at 10 when I would rather talk till 3?
So here's the way I see it. On an individual basis, that person says to himself, "Oh, I have to get up in the morning. I'm so tired." So there are, let's say, little people in his body, or like
Mhm.
parts of himself that are like, "This sucks. I hate waking up early." But the majority says of his body is like, "I have to get up. I have to study. I have to move." So I say in society, there's people who are like, "Oh, I hate these rules. I don't want to live by them." But if the majority of society or the rest of the body says it's time to get up, or the rest of society says this is good for us, then although there's some strife in society, as long as the laws are to benefit you, or you feel like they'll benefit you in the long run, I think that's what people will try to gear towards.
So you're saying I should make the bodies in my head bow to all the other ones if a lot of people say something.
Can you rephrase the question?
So if a lot of people say something, then I should just be like, yeah, cool.
What I'm saying is, it's more like,
Oh, I know what you're saying. I'm just being a jerk. But let me very leadingly, so we can transition out of this. Are you saying I should self-inhibit for a so-called greater good?
yes.
Okay. So my question, that was the framing question at the beginning, we'll come back to now. So let me read some of these from online first. Rules exist because chaos exists. Rules exist for the benefit of order, rather than have order is beneficial, beauty and order. There's some really good ones here, actually. Okay. So let me re-ask what would have been originally the leading question, but usually I'd rabbit hole that and then ask those scenarios. And so that's why I want to do the opposite this time. Given all this randomness that we talked about of different things, we talked social, political boundaries, personal boundaries, geopolitical boundaries, personal safety, physicality. Those are the reasons why I chose the different questions that I chose. Are we free?
Define free.
Define free.
You're asking a question.
Oh, I'm vague on purpose of when people say I want to be free in whatever way they socially mean that, are we?
Technically,
What about my flying?
you can try it. You're free to attempt.
But what if I want to fly and can't? Am I free?
You have the free will to attempt to fly. You are physically bound. It's like someone with no legs saying, I want to walk. They can't. They can try and walk on their stubs. And some people do, but
So then they are not free to walk.
it's a limitation that's just built into them.
Also, there's a limitation to freedom. Sorry, I'm being facetious now.
Yes,
Okay.
kind of.
I guess it depends on how you define free as, what you define as being able to do something. For example, just having, I would say, oh, like, for example, God is ultimate. You say him as God is ultimate, can do anything. That's how we view him, and how he is. But can God lie? No. Why? Because lying is the failure of telling the truth. It is an inability to do something that is positive and good. So sometimes we look at things as like ability, but rather it's an inability of doing something else.
Okay. I want to do on it, but I won't yet. Anyone else want to restructure it? Online, someone's saying we are free to choose how we live, but not free to live how we choose. Maybe. But what is binding it? If we're like those hesitant to say that we're free based on what? Go for it before you don't have to answer that one. I'll just eat the mic. Sorry.
Concept of being in our nature free. We are free, but we are not a car, for example. A car has four wheels, it drives a certain extent, even old cars can't get to a certain speed. You can't fly, you can't build wings to fly, but you are free to try. If a paralyzed person wants to get up and walk, yeah, they can try.
Why can't they
Are
walk?
they gonna do it? No.
Why
But
not?
because it's in their design. It's how they are built. It's how God created them.
So you're saying they're limited by something.
If you're limited, you're not free.
So then are we free?
There's not
So,
freedom.
so they can't walk. Are they free? Euro. Eat the mic.
taking it a step farther than they can just try to walk. Well, there is nothing stopping them from taking sticks and walking with them.
But they want to walk with legs and I want to swim with gills.
Fair enough. Then if you can find a way to do it, you can. If you push the technology far enough, you can.
Okay, but I want it now,
But I.
right? Ms. John, did you have yours up? Okay.
So I think we're only free within like the parameters that we're given, like whether that's by God or by just wherever we come from. There's parameters around us and we can't go outside of it. And you can try to go to, but like you will always fail. And like if you really want to think that you can do it, go ahead.
Okay.
You're welcome to try. You're free to try. You are free to try, but you're not free to do. You're only free to do anything inside those parameters, not outside of them.
So you're saying you're free with inhibition.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna fast forward a second because there's somewhere else I want to go before the end of this talk. Online, one person has been very, very thoughtful. Response: the question whether we are free or not is a deeply philosophical, subjective one, debated throughout history by scholars and thinkers, etc. And then from a philosophical standpoint, he's talking about political freedom, existential freedom, determinism versus free will, etc. I'm gonna skip all of that because you guys are saying what I wanted to get at, you're just not articulating. Let me ask the question in a different way. Do you have absolute freedom?
No.
And that's where I wanted to get. So I know that this is annoying, but the reason why I'm saying it is because this is not the why, but it's definitely something that comes up. What does almost everybody say when they leave religion?
It was freeing.
Yeah, it was liberating, right? So I'm trying to make a point is that even free of the narrative of religion, are you actually free? You're not. You're not absolutely free, right? You are bound by many things, right? You are bound by physics, right? You are bound by your body. I can't grow gills. I cannot, right? The person who has no legs is bound by that, right? You're bound by nature, right? I can't decide that I can fly, right? You are bound socially, and apparently everyone here and online believes in social inhibition, right? Where you're voluntarily inhibiting on some level a behavior for the sake of the so-called good, whatever the definition of good, I don't care, right? But there's been a voluntary inhibition. I'm saying I could, right? To your point, I could, but I will not because we've made whatever the social contract is, all these constructs that we're talking about. But my point and part of trying to do this is saying, but you're just sliding into someone's narrative, right? That's all you've done, right? Is that, and that's why the order of this is on purpose, is absolute truth first, right? And then to talk about, well, then the so-called rules are based on what? They're all pointing at truth, right? And if they're not pointing at truth, of course there'll be questions, right? That's why it is okay to question whether the rules we made are good or not. But then that begs the question, if I'm saying good rule, what's good, right? Some of you brought up utilitarianism, right? Of being like, is that what decides it's good? Well, who decided it was useful and what is usefulness, right? And I guess what I'm trying to get at is connected to last week is that in this society where we have become relativistic, another way of saying it that was a cool framework for me to feel like I could understand what was going on is we're dealing with adjectives and adverbs, right? That we're obsessed with those. And we're completely forgetting that those point at nouns, right? And so if we are going to have a discussion about freedom, there is no such thing as being able to discuss freedom if I'm not aware of nouns, right? Like that I am inhibited by nouns because nouns are theoretically real. So if they're real, there are consequences, right? So if I really have a kidney, if there's such thing as a noun called a kidney, and if there's such thing as a noun called health, then I can assess healthiness, right? Then I can have a cascade of adjectives to describe my kidney, right? But if there's no such thing as those nouns, all of this is completely fictitious. And this is the narrative that the public is working in, and I actually think many Christians have plugged into, and forget the real narrative, like what you were referring to. And instead, and this is why I'm building to our narrative, but I want to undo the narratives that we're in, because when we start saying your truth, my truth, etc., right? Or other really cliche and nonsensical comments like I'm spiritual but not religious, whatever that means, because on a noun level, that's incoherent. On a social structure level, maybe, but on a noun level, absolutely nonsensical, right? Then I'm like, you're plugging into something that actually makes no sense, right? And then we're getting annoyed at the rules, right? And so if we're ignoring, so in religion, and we're going to get to that, everyone's concerned about the so-called rules. And when we get to the narrative, the question is going to be, is it a rule?
Is this the same, I guess, frame of thought that, like, the statement over tolerance breeds intolerance comes from?
Could be. It could be. I'm not educated enough, to be quite honest here, to answer, or I don't know enough historically. On a subjective personal level, where there's room for that, I would probably agree. But what does limitation, if we're going to use that word, right? And it's an unpopular word because we don't like it, right? And part of why I'm saying this is because when we get to the narrative is like almost everybody, at least, well, not a lot of people confess anymore, but when they did, it would often be, am I allowed to insert the question, right? And it's like, you can do whatever you want, right? But then the question is, like St. Paul says in modern English, I can do whatever I want, but not everything is good, right? And then the good is referring to capital T truth. But what does it mean? Is there a change in meaning about me if I'm inhibited? Does it have meaning about my value? What does being inhibited mean with respect to my value? If someone says, no, you're not allowed to do something, does that mean something about me? Matthew.
All it means is that you're not the absolute, like you are not the top of the pyramid, you're not the God figure, whatever, whatever, let's take out religious context, but you're not literally the top of the food chain, because everyone else has limitations. But if you think about it in that respect, then that's everybody. So no, it doesn't mean anything. It just means you're not at the very, very, very top.
Excellent, because that's somewhere I wanted to get to eventually, which is what or who is the only thing uninhibited and why? God and why? Even deeper.
Why is he uninhibited?
Yeah.
He made the rules, they don't apply to him.
How could he make the rules? And we're going the right now. I'm not playing devil's advocate. Now I just want to get to something.
How could he make them?
Yeah. What does it mean about God that he's able to do that? Matthew just said it.
Self-determined
Thank you. By what? By choice?
by nature.
Thank you. By nature. Okay. And I think that's what we're forgetting in this. The only reason is because he is the only one self-existent. That is his actual nature. It's not an authority proclamation, right? It's not, I've decided to be who I am. And then using that, I've decided to do these things. It's I am who I am. And this is why, and I'm skipping ahead and I'm sorry because there might be repetition. This is why when they ask God, who are you? What is your name? When Moses is saying, who are you? His answer is, I am. I am the one who is. We don't have a word for it in English. Being, be-ing, right? I always say this. It's almost like the way that I wish it could be framed in English because it's not a real word is, I'm the one who is always ising. Like, is that like, I just am, right? This is like, I'm not giving you a special name. I'm not giving you anything like that. I just is, right? And that's again why in liturgy we say the be-ing. Go for it.
Could it be because God never was and never will be? Because he created time, which means that was and will be are applicable only in time. And if we're drawing a bubble and calling that bubble time, he created it.
Oh,
He's not
I
in
love
it or
this.
affected by it.
So this in the Coptic Church, the liturgical cycle, that thought we were obsessed with for a while. Actually, for those who prayed this Sabbath last night for the greatest saint, Saint Anthony, some of the beautiful verses from the praises are the uncircumscribed, the one who cannot be circumscribed, right? Became contained by taking on flesh, right? The one out of time entered time, right? The immortal took on flesh and took on mortality is exactly that, right? But what I'm trying to get at is that it's not a limitation. It doesn't mean something bad about me. In fact, what does knowing the truth about something do? Whether it was geopolitical, if there is such thing as capital T truth here, okay? I'm not talking about small t truth. If there is such thing as capital T truth about my body, about politics, I don't mean politics in the social sense, but I mean as in structures. If there is about borders and land and money and giving and taking and morality and entering people's homes, what if there is a capital T truth about that? The natural question that follows is then what does that mean in terms of me? It's intentionally vague, but what does it mean? Christine, you're nodding. Can you say something? I know I'm putting you on the spot and you're an introvert, but malish. That escalated.
Wait, what's the question? So
What does that mean? If there is a real capital T truth, what does that mean about me, about my freedom, about all these things we discussed?
that I am existing within that?
Yes. And what would conformity to that mean in terms of positive and negative? Like I'm trying not to overly lead it. Say that again?
Is there a positive and negative to it?
Yes, there is.
Without it, it's negative, and with it, it's positive, because it is the only thing that is.
Perfect. Right? It must be good. If this is how it is, if there's an objective T, then conforming to it, is that a good or a bad thing? It's a good thing because it means I'm following what it was made to be. Right? That's why there's such thing as a good kidney or a non-good kidney. Is a good kidney is conforming to good kidneyness. Okay, so if there is such thing as a capital T, then I might be consequently inhibited, right? So that might be the case of saying, if there's such thing as a real healthy liver, if there's a capital T truth about liver, then there's a reason why I shouldn't binge drink, right? And so I might be inhibited theoretically, right? In the sense of like, to your point, I have the ability to drink it if I want, but just saying that, but because of the truth, I might now self-inhibit for reasons of health about which there's truth.
So the only thing that is worthy of our supplication would be the only thing that is true.
Absolutely.
So regardless of if it is, we'll say objectively good or bad, it is the only thing.
Yes.
As such, it is the only thing that is, again, worthy at all. If
Yes.
we're following false things that are not true, not real, that can become was or can be like later, they're not real, but he is.
Yep. That sentence alone might be why we might not need to do the talk about goodness. Because this is the issue, is that what we do wrongly is we forget that there is a capital T. So then we discuss utilitarianism, right? Then you might discuss function, you might discuss cause effect. There's all the different social structures you come up with to determine laws and structures, et cetera, et cetera. Those are helpful where there's not a capital T truth. I'm not against those. They're not inherently wrong, right? But I'm just saying that they're nonsensical if there's a capital T truth. So if there's such thing as a healthy liver, it doesn't matter if we vote about it. Right. So if there's such thing as a healthy liver, and we're like, well, we've decided as a collective group that actually it is useful that people drink, and that we've decided that that's okay with the liver. And it's like, but there is, to last week's point, a truth about that that exists whether you've arrived at it or not. Right. It doesn't matter that we voted on it. Right? If we're falling within the rules, quote unquote, or the inhibition of health, right? Then it means something else. But I was thinking to maybe look in a different way, is that if I understand truth to be revealing the true nature of something, then actually freedom, viewed differently, is not about doing whatever I want. Freedom could be looked as being released from disease, right? As that in following the truth, I am freed from disease. And following freedom properly, of freedom being defined by the natural limitation. And the natural limitation is truth, right? Then suddenly I'm liberated from the wrong that would happen to me when I conform to the right, to the good. John,
So then what is disease? Non-existent?
sorry?
Then what is-
Disease, this is excellent, and that actually is part of the narrative we're going to get to. But fast forwarding to that, disease is anything against health. So disease can be any way that I take design or truth and use it wrongly. So if this is designed to be how I breathe through my nostrils and I shove gum up it, right? That's disease, right? I've used it wrongly, and there's an effect. I now can't breathe properly. Disease is say I will take the car, and we're definitely going to talk about this in much more detail. A designed car that has real material, and I scratch it, and now it corrodes when it rains, because there's something real.
So would truth lead to existence and opposite of truth would lead to destruction?
Yes, that is why the consequence of sin is death, because it's anti-life, right? But then that's, again, we're going to get into that with the narrative. So truth, and I'm sorry, it's been roughly an hour. I'll stop any second now. Everyone knows I have a disease because I talk about it all the time, right? So in knowing about my issues, knowing that I can't eat certain foods, I'm liberated from the ill effects of eating foods that I can, because there's a truth about why I can't, right? That there's a consequence to that. So I want us, and there's no such thing as freedom absolute other than that which is free in its own nature, which is God. Okay? For the rest of us, because we are relative, right? We are not absolute. We are confined by body, physicality, social, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those are not the natural one. But I'm trying to go in this order, saying that there is a truth that anybody's narrative trying to claim that like where you have the ability to be free, but you're being inhibited. That's a probably false narrative. It could be right if understood properly, but I'm just saying you're all in a narrative, right? So you're in a narrative claiming that I don't need to care, but actually I do if there's a real answer to whether there's a design or not, right? And so that's why I'm not going to get to the apologetics of why do you believe the narrative that we believe in, okay? But I think what I'm going to do next week is to talk about what is faith, because I think we talk about faith, to be honest, completely wrongly. And so we think faith is blind, which was never the request. There was never a request that I trust blindly. That was not something that God ever demanded from us. And in fact, the design of creation almost points at the opposite, but we'll get into that, and then get into the narrative, like, what is it that I'm trusting? What is it that I'm saying yes to? Because there's two aspects of faith, which we'll talk about next week. And then get into the narrative. So I'm sorry if this was really boring or snail pace. But again, I just want to undo the whole framework, so that when we get into the real stuff, it can matter. Because like I said at the beginning, if you don't know the narrative, Eucharist is meaningless. It's just mumbo jumbo. It's just a ritual that we do. If you don't know the narrative, your marriage in a sacramental sense is completely nonsensical, right? It's all following from a true story, right? A true story of which every one of us is a member. It's not a story that ended, right? It's a story that continues. And glory be to God forever. Amen. Any thoughts, questions, additions, meditations? Go for it.
So when we talk about narrative, what do we mean by narrative? Are we like saying a story should be complete? Who decides that a story is complete or not? To what extent? What are the elements?
So what I meant when I'm saying it is that a sacrament is a claim, right? Like we're claiming in the sacrament of matrimony that two people are actually becoming one, not symbolically. Right? So what I'm trying to get at is that only makes sense if that's really true. And where do we get that from? Right? We're claiming in someone's baptism that they are renewed, right? And that they're returned to health, and then that they receive the Holy Spirit. That's either true or it isn't. Right? And those truth claims are based on this whole narrative that took place in real history. Right? So that's what I meant more by it, is to say that if we don't plug into that, we can't make sense of the world, right? Otherwise, it just becomes whether I feel like it or not, as opposed to whether it's healthy objectively or not. John.
This question. How important is it to understand kind of all the things leading up to the faith? Because we know that faith without works is dead, and the inverse is also true. Works without faith is also dead. So how important is the knowledge of each thing?
I think it depends. This is where the subjective comes in. I think it's important as a community that we know. I don't know that I care that every individual be an expert on it. I know for somebody who struggled with faith, this was a big deal to me, right? Because the whole questioning, I mean, like I would have been scared to, like I said last week, I'd be scared to do this exercise 15 years ago. I'd be worried I'd turn someone into an atheist, right? Now almost everybody is, right? But it does matter in the sense of being like, when somebody says, well, think of the questions I was asking, but being asked of you as a believer, why are you anti um gay marriage, for example, or in your church, right? Isn't that you being judgmental, right? But it's if I don't believe in this real narrative, then I actually don't have an answer to that. Then it is just utilitarian, for example, right? So it does matter that we know that it's really true and that it's not just a nice story. That matters a lot to me. The nitty-gritty, I'm not that every individual needs to know, but I think the community does, so that we're ready to help those among us who are struggling with that.
Is it necessary that as, I'm gonna say a society, but just as people in general, that we have to agree with everything that everyone individually wants? Is that necessary for a functioning proper society?
No, and I think realistically, everyone knows that it's not, right? And I think that's why we've experimented historically as persons, right? We've experimented with empires, we've experimented with kingdoms. Even democracy is an infantile experiment, really, in the grand scheme of the history of the world, right? This is an UNO, right? And so, and we're finding all sorts of problems with it right now, where it's like, wow, this worked really well when we all thought similarly. Now we don't. So now it's becoming problematic, right? Of like, well, whose will do you listen to, and to what extent are we inhibiting freedoms? And that's partially my point of saying we're all being inhibited, and that's going to be a natural consequence. Sorry, I just want to ignore the people online. Let me read a couple of these out loud, and if there's more questions, could you say that God is to say is I am who I am equals this means God is being, am to be who this one is. Sorry, yes, I would say that. Another thing, freedom in Christianity is more than just the ability to make choices. It's about liberation from the bondage of sin and restoration of a right relation with God. Yes, I agree. At its core, Christian freedom is found in Jesus Christ. Through his sacrifice and resurrection, believers are set free from the power of sin and death. This freedom isn't licensed to do whatever one pleases, but an invitation to live in accordance with God's will, guided by love, grace, and righteousness. It's about aligning one's will with the will of God and walking in obedience to his commandments. True freedom in Christianity is ultimately found in knowing, following Christ, experiencing his transformative power, and living a life of purpose, service, and love. Agreed 100%. And we're going to get more into that with the narrative. Question here is, why is it a good thing to follow the way things are made to be? Why being in life better than being in non-existence, or a kidney to exhibit good kidneyness than bad kidneyness? That's something, that's a great question. It's a matter of identity, right? And I think that's the irony of all of this is like we're all about identity politics today, and we just don't want a real identity, right? And so it's like, yeah, you can say I don't want to have a healthy kidney, and that's where your freedom comes in, where you can say, "Those I don't want a healthy kidney." You're allowed to just eat the price tag of that. That's all. right? So no one is holding a gun to your head saying you got to be healthy. And that's why something I think we struggle as religious institutions when we try and enforce righteousness. That's not okay, right? God himself doesn't enforce it. So there has to be a freedom to align with truth or not align with truth. Sorry again for I hope I'm not annoying you guys with this structure, but it'll get more blended lecture discussion style, probably at like talk 4 or so. Unless you guys like this. I like usually with any topic, I kind of like there at least to be a few questions at the beginning. It doesn't have to go as rabbit hole as these. So that the relevance of the topic comes out. Because I think when it's just data, it's like, yeah. But when it's understood of where does this play out in real life makes a difference. Okay, thank you, guys. We'll end with prayer. Thank you guys for your patience online. Hope it wasn't painful for you guys. All right. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Lord, hear us intercession of the Holy Mother, of Saint Mary, the great Saint Anthony, and Saint Pope Cornelius, our Father, who art in heaven. Be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not to temptation, some evil one in Christ Jesus our Lord. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Go in peace, the Lord be with you.